1, World's Best Workforce Report.
And I'll hard copies.
Okay.
All right, so we are here to do the World's Best Workforce Summary, which is basically looking at our goals from last year and then analyzing whether or not we met them, and also discuss the different things that we have in place to work towards those. There's basically different components of the World's Best Workforce. Does everybody have a copy? Okay. So you can see on the top it says just our district name, what grades we have, and then who the contact person, and that's Brian, and then whatever he gets that he thinks that we need to know, he forwards on to us. And so he's the main contact person for this. The first part is stakeholder engagement, and for that we have to have the annual report published somewhere, and ours is on our website, so if you wanted to go back and look at last year's, that's there, and then as soon as this is approved and sent off and all the the tweaks made, we'll be putting it on the website for this year also. The next piece is the public meeting. That's tonight. This is our public meeting that we're having. And then the next piece of the summary is basically the advisory committee. And there's not so much an advisory committee for the summary report because it's kind of facts, just what happened, but the advisory committee about what going forward, how we're developing the goals at our site and bringing them to, forth to the public. And so how we're setting our goals for this year, so next year when we do the summary report, we can report back to you. So all of us at our buildings work with our leadership teams to develop those and then tweak them as needed, but that's basically how we develop our goals. Try to have a representation there. The first goal is really for Margot and Peg. It is all students ready for school, and I will let them talk about that.
So the goal was 50% participation in school readiness, and there was only 48% participation. And part of that, if we could also address why, it would be a space issue. We have a waiting list. So a space issue is why we don't have more people. And the other, in talking with Roseanne, would be transportation. Where we transport now one way from licensed daycares in town. But if in an ideal world, if we had space, and we could go 4 days a week, half days, 4 half days a week, and if we could transport, from daycare centers, from homes, from licensed and grandma and grandpas and aunts and uncles, other people that are doing daycare as parents are at work. And so what does school readiness mean? Well, we know that they have to be 4 years old by September 1st in order to enroll. And then we know that Roseanne does screenings for children, but we also know that we have a Ready for K committee that kind of got a good start, then got put on hold during referendum and language arts and got kicked back up. And one of their things that they really pushed, and I need to thank Donna and Lori for that, is what happened this fall. Building those first connections and relationship building with our kindergarten parents and having that time to meet with the parents individually and the kids individually, and during that time to do an assessment. And so they're using Handwriting Without Tears, part of that program for assessment for the reading and the math and just the readiness and holding a book, holding a pencil, all that type of thing. What's missing right now, well, I would say are a couple of things, is that we have, it's just like when we had parent paid kindergarten. We had those that were really well ready for kindergarten because it was self-paid. So we have the 48% coming. We have low income going to Head Start, and then we have that gap. So part of our challenge is what can we do to get those kids in that gap area ready for kindergarten. And then we also know that more and more, as we look at the whole child, that's what this whole thing needs to look at, is the whole child, not just how many letters do you know, how many numbers do you know, but are you socially and emotionally ready as well? That we have more and more kids that with very right decisions and recommendations from kindergarten staff are not moving on to first grade or not ready for first grade and are having a second year of kindergarten. I know that Donna will tell parents that's that gift of time that you can never have back. I mean, that's a great way of putting it. But one of the next steps for the Ready for a K committee would be to take a look at what do you do with those kids that aren't ready for first grade and repeating kindergarten. I mean, what can we do in between to fill those needs to get that foundation ready?
Yeah, that was great. Any questions about 2A? So 2B is all students in third grade achieving grade level literacy. And again, I will let the third grade principals talk about that.
So as we take a look at that, you know, a large part of why we did make progress.
Mm-hmm.
Did we make our 5% growth? No, we didn't. But we made progress from where we were in proficiency the year before, and that's absolutely amazing as we adopted a new curriculum. That's almost unheard of. We were expecting a big drop. And why we make any progress at all is because of the people that are in the classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
They're implementing it with fidelity, and they believe in it. You know, so we did increase our percentage of third graders proficient. We did not meet that 70% goal. How did we meet it and what are we doing? You know, I'll go back to that whole language arts committee, and now in year 3, and the process, and I won't go through that again because we've presented many times, but just that support in the process, from Carrie Yates to the literacy coach to the embedded staff development, that piece being missing in a lot of initiatives, but then embedded staff development and time. And so year 1 in implementation was last year. Now we're in year 2.
Well, and with what, you know, Peg had said, I can reiterate that working with my literacy background and adopting a new curriculum, it really is, it's a hard transition. So to make any growth and not regress whatsoever is huge. It's absolutely a huge asset. It just really is, because teachers are learning new things. It's all about routine. It's about consistency, expectations, and that too. So, you know, again, thinking about how our goals are aligned to that, you know, what can we do now? Where can we intervene more? Where is that professional development needed more so with making the 5%?
I'm sorry, was the question? No, okay. The next piece is close the achievement gap among all groups, and the areas that we really focused on, because those were our major gaps, were the free and reduced versus the non-free and reduced, and the gap between special ed and non-special ed students. And again, this is really focusing more on elementary. So,
Well, and I think when we talked about our goals this summer, our goals that we have for our buildings that you've seen on the posters and stuff really align to that, you know, looking at what's best for learners and creating relationships and really looking at, you know what, did we meet the goals in these? No, we didn't. For the free reduced, for the special ed, we went from the decrease from 34.9 in 2016 to 32.7 in 2017. So that is the proficiency gap piece. You know, are we making gains? Yes, and we're doing that because we're building relationships. We're really working with families, we're working with teachers, we're working with the community, and it's not just relationships with the kids, it's relationships with the families, knowing and understanding how the families work, the special ed piece works, the free reduced piece works. It's just that climate and culture of the families. And free and reduced lunch and sped kids are a big part of our population when it comes to, you know, the achieving that gap. So again, the numbers weren't off very much. And that's what I think all of our goals, building wide or district wide, have that culture and climate piece built in, because that's the start of closing that achievement gap, understanding and knowing who our kids are and our families are.
and it's a lot about programming, thinking about how can we, if what we were doing wasn't working, how can we meet the needs of our special ed students? Do we need to do different schedule changes at the middle school, bring back intervention time, have more after school programming? It's just really thinking about what that data is telling us. And so we are focusing on because this is so important, it's 2C, it is required by the world's best workforce, and it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things when I think about technology, how do we, for those that don't have technology at home, because we have those. So we have a built-in system about how, because middle school students don't get to take home their computers unless they have a need. And we've made it a little bit less identifying and a little bit more in their hands about how they can do it. And that has really increased the need for some students to take their computers home if they don't have that technology at home. So all this plays into closing that gap and really thinking about it and being intentional about it.
And understanding different populations, because I know last year we brought in Christy Jacobson and we brought in Carrie Whipple to talk about our ELL population and, you know, how to work with families and what some of the ways that we need to, some of the things, excuse me, that we need to do here at school. Some of the, that was very good. But we know that we need to bring in more on poverty.
Mental health issues.
Yeah.
We're looking at really focusing on those mental health issues for our kids.
Bringing the grab-and-go breakfast in the morning for breakfast because if for easy access to the middle school students, because if they're hungry, they're not going to learn. You know, just thinking some outside the box a lot. We won't read the numbers to you. You guys can review those. The next one is all students career and college ready by graduation. This is kind of an interesting one because how do you really measure that? You know, there isn't an big exiting test that you take, or you know, like when you apply to med school or law school, there's an LSAT or MCAT that tells you whether or not you're ready for that piece. So it really is the graduation part, which Matt will talk about in a minute. But for us, what we really focus on is, continue to focus on, is that career and college ready and preparedness for our students. And I'm really proud of all the work that our staff has done on that. You know, whether it was that STEAM grant that we talked to you about last year, and you saw some of the work that they did through Lakes Country, the 21st century, the very focusing on the 4 C's. The other day we had a Your Hired Day, and I quizzed the 8th graders out here. They were all sitting over here, if you can imagine that. And while the lady was trying to explain it to them, and I asked them what the 4 C's were. And it was really neat to see, as much as 8th graders will volunteer, how many of them knew what the 4 C's were. And so I think, you know, we're getting there. Project-based learning, some of you are aware of some of the things that have happened. Probably one of the best examples that I can think of right now is Mrs. Moffett and Mr. Will doing the mining, where the kids had to use the robots to go down to the mine. And so they're doing that, working together, working collaboratively, and really working on solving a problem. Because that's what you do in a job, is you solve problems. This gets them ready for the next level. Wrap up for Readiness, I can't say enough about the work that Katie Ullman has done, getting that up and going and working on all those individual files for our students. She's getting there. I think our counseling program has really evolved because of the support that we've gotten from the community and the school board on being able to have more people in place to do that. Before we were putting out a lot of fires, now we're able to be a little bit more preventive and proactive. And that is really starting to show, I think, in how much we're keeping kids in class instead of other places, how we're able to have them say, I think, Mrs. Critcher, when I grow up, I want to be a medical technologist. I didn't know what a medical technologist was when I was in 7th grade. You know, and they're starting to use some of those words. Our after-school programming, you know, Mrs. Hopper has done a fabulous job with our club, and she also talks about our careers in her art class that they all get 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And there's more to art than being a teacher or, you know, being an artist that sells paintings. And she talks about the different things that you can do with an art career. That's an example. Katie does a lot of post-secondary planning. I feel like she's in the classroom at least once a month, if not every 2 months, meeting with all the kids, talking about whether it's doing interest and value tests, but doing different things that starts exposing them and getting them excited. So when they get to high school, maybe they're a little bit more invested in their education because they know that there's an end, there's a means, there's a reason that they're doing this. College program of the month. When you're leaving today, if you get a chance to go by the middle school lobby right out here, every month Katie has both a college and a career that she does a bulletin board for, and that's where kids are a lot, you know, whether they're bouncing basketballs, and I'm telling them to stop because there's glass all over, but there's always something when they, you know, talking about nursing. Mrs. Critchley, I didn't know nurses could make $85,000 a year. Yeah, they can. You know, so talking about what some of those things are, and she puts facts up there and how you get there in the career track. So she does a really nice job with that. And then your hired STEAM dates. We had just had one last not this Friday because we didn't have school, but the Friday before we had a Your Hire Day. And it was really fun because this year we had some high school students come over and be judges. I think Jocelyn was there. And they did a great job. Boy, they didn't let these kids off easy. I mean, they came in and they had these problems that they had solved and they had to present on. And these kids, our high school kids, really grilled them and made them think, well, what would you do if you didn't have enough money for that? And it was on nutrition, wasn't it, Jocelyn?
Yeah.
Nutrition.
Like school lunches.
School lunches, yeah. So you can imagine that was a hot topic, school lunches. So, I think all of these things really, in addition to our AVID programming and some of the things we're doing, are getting kids exposed to college and career, which at the middle school level is what we're focusing on.
Agreed. Well, I think it's been alluded to. We're only as good as the information we're collecting. And we've shifted in our goal setting a little bit because actually the state stepped back on some of the measuring tools that we used to use. You might be familiar with the term MMR, the multiple measures results. With that being a part of it, graduation rate was a part of that measure at the high school. But it also included our MCA testing and those types of things. So when the state kind of shifted off of that, our focus ended up being on the graduation rate, which I would agree too. And I think what we've kind of seen thinly veiled here a little bit too is we have an awesome graduation rate. Mm-hmm. But then we have those deeper dive conversations that reflect the preparedness and the readiness that our students exit us with. Mm-hmm. We have 5 outstanding individuals here that take very rigorous courses. You can walk in and out of a lot of the college classes that we offer right on campus, and they're working hard. And the thing that I think I appreciate a lot with that shift is seeing how much group work and focus there is, like you talked about the problem solving. Mm-hmm. But where are we exiting those students with those strong skill sets, but not necessarily that 4-year interest afterwards? And we've had that conversation. How can we bolster our programming? You mentioned special ed too, and closing the gap in some of those areas. And one thing that's required is we have our kids exit us is to have a plan, a transition plan from high school to their next steps. I've never seen it done with such integrity as the teachers who work with those students in our building, and the remarkable steps in which they go to even establish work site location for our kids to be working on, or that introduction to the M-State or those other programmings. Kids have a pretty clear focus on at least a goal that they can begin with working. And again, it's not just an idea, it's a well-laid plan. So it's kind of neat to see those areas close ranks a little bit too as we talk about any learning gaps. Average, from what I recall, statewide is probably mid to low 80s as far as graduation rates go. So when we're sitting at 97%, it's pretty awesome. Is it sustainable? Well, I certainly hope so. But we also have a growing population, and with that, we have greater needs. So we'll be serving all people who come to us, obviously. As we take a look at a unique thing that goes along with this, that means those students that have spent enough time with us and actually have left us, and maybe to go to another district, are still counted on our record books as far as the state goes. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how many years that need to be with us before they are ours completely, but that's one thing that Troy Haugen and I have visited about too, as we take a look at doing business in a different way. So with some of the sidebar conversations that we've had at both the regional level and even with our colleagues in Moorhead and some other folks, trying to figure out, well, where are we meeting the needs of those 2-year driven students or career bound students. I think we do an awesome job exiting our kids with 4-year, if that's their approach. However, again, I'm going to go back to what we've kind of, even we had a speaker last week that started out kind of her conversation with, they're prepared, they have a lot of great coursework, but then the next step is, do they have the grit and perseverance to handle the next setting that they're moving into? And do they have those soft skills to make them successful? How do we measure those? So it's going to be kind of fun diving more into those conversations over time.
And teaching them that it's okay to fail and try again, which is a really hard concept for some kids, that it's okay, you just have to problem solve and try again. So we're working on that.
So, as we take a look at other ways, maybe that's going to shift our goal setting. It's not unusual in the state of Minnesota to see a lot of the goals reflected around graduation rate right now, because that's one tangible we can really quantify. But in the future, what kind of information we're going to ask of our post-grads when they're finished up, and go back to you a couple years later and find out how you're going to be taking care of us. That would be nice. But I don't want to move on from here either without recognizing a couple great accomplishments. So Sophia, I'm having your 1,000
Assist.
volleyball assist.
Yep.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And then we also have a young lady that made the state all team. What did you say? All team state or
All state. Yeah.
So along with that, the support of obviously all the other teammates here, you guys provided us a remarkable and fun season to watch. Your leadership was outstanding, and it's great to know that your presence is going to be viewed by some of those other students that need to be mentored by you throughout the rest of the year. So if we can give them a hand.
Okay, the next piece is identified needs based on data, and we've been kind of talking about that. It's just kind of reiterating what we need to focus on. We talked today, Peg and I, about really wanting to get, and also with the system strategies and support, the next one, really wanting to get, use Lakes Country a little bit more. They are super about coming in and working with us and going through our data, because it takes a long, uninterrupted time to go through these, and they do it for a lot of different districts, and they're more than willing to come in and work with us. And so we talked today about wanting that to happen again and come in and show us what are some of the things they're seeing with their trend data, especially when we have the last year's spring 2017 results. We use the MCAs and started assessments for our main data. You know, the MCAs are nice. You get them in the fall from the year before. But really, I would say the STAR data is a lot more useful. Would you guys have anything to say about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And with that, providing that professional development and how our teachers can use that, and our interventionists can use that, and our sped teachers can use that to actually instruct their data. So data-driven instruction, I think, is a huge thing, and it's a right now that we can progress monitor. We can say, wow, you've made blah, blah, blah growth, and we can actually take the data and look and say, yep, you made growth in this strand or in this piece. Yes, what are we doing there? And then have that conversation between teachers and saying, okay, I did this really well. How did you do this really well? And kind of opening up those barriers a little bit to get that conversation about that data-based instruction. I think that's a huge asset to our district.
And it's very accessible to teachers, which they like. The next piece just talks about our teachers and principals evaluation, or it talks about instruction and curriculum, and they kind of talked about that, about how they implemented it with the 6 through 12 has new language arts curriculum this year, so we'll be reporting on that next year. But we do have the locally approved model for evaluation. Non-tenured teachers have it 3 times a year. Tenured teachers are on a 3-year rotating basis. That really hasn't changed from last year, because that's kind of just what it is. It's the fact. And then the principal evaluations occur once per year. A lot of that is self-reflection, goal setting that align with both what our site and district goals are that make sense. We should be working on that, and then maybe something more that's along in our own professional growth area. And we work with Mr. Ferguson on those. There's a piece on here about technology and the collaborative professional culture. That's something that I'm really proud of. I think at DGF Public Schools, they do a fabulous job. The support from our community with technology is amazing. We have people that come in and they get a computer? Yes, but it's beyond that. It's not only putting it in the hands of students, but it's how our teachers are using it. I recently did an evaluation of a new teacher, and there wasn't a piece of paper that was handed out the whole period. And the kids were carrying their computers, going around. They had a Google Doc open, and they were working on it together. They're collaborating. It was really neat to see. And sometimes they use paper, so they're kind of doing it when it makes sense. And that particular group project they were doing, it definitely made sense for them to have kind of a living Google document that they were working on. So very much appreciate that. We use the SAMR technology goal. That's just basically a self-assessment. Where are you at individually as a teacher, and where do you want to go? And then there's also a clarity survey that's given through the technology department. I believe that's usually in December. That's all right?
And that also gives us information about how we are doing technology-wise in the district. The PLCs are professional learning communities exist at the levels, and that's to promote collaboration and support. At the middle school, for example, we have common prep time so that they can meet. There is a formal time that they meet as the PLCs, and there's lots of collaboration that occurs because they have that time and that prep time together where they can get together, and it's really student focused. What can we do to help our students succeed? What is working with one student in one classroom might help that same student be successful in another classroom. So there definitely is that collaboration piece that's occurring in there. And that last piece is access to excellent teachers, and basically talks about how we recruit, advertise, and hire. We use a team model when we interview. For example, if I'm hiring for a 6th grade teacher, I'm going to ask the 6th grade team, everybody on that 6th grade team, whoever is available to help me select and interview those candidates, and we decide collaboratively who's the best fit for our team. And that really helps too, because there's a lot of investment in that person when they come. And then also our teacher mentoring teachers, fabulous committee that has really helped our teachers feel part of DGF and help them with their needs as they are navigating a new school system. That is the report. What we're in the process of here before Christmas break is we really want to get where we are, have our measurable goals, our SMART goals in those areas identified. Maybe not perfectly written, but a good idea, and then hopefully call in Lakes Country and have them go through them with us a little bit more. And then work with our leadership teams on setting those, so when we come back next year, we can tell you how we did to move our students forward.
One last positive detail I wanted to leave you with, and I know some of these young ladies who are part of this as well. I didn't give enough of an advertisement for our counseling staff, as Heidi covered that well, but our 2 counselors at the high school, as they're working together, provide all sorts of exposure and opportunities to become more familiar with the schools that we have locally, regionally, and they have one of those days is an application day in the state of Minnesota where they waive the fees to apply to the colleges. I believe we had over 150 submitted applications in that one day. And they provided all the connections as counselors to getting other people into our building. We had college advisors from every local school, and they helped our kids sit down step by step, and if they didn't have a plan, they left with one. So that was great.
Can I just say one more thing too? With looking at these things as somebody that's new to the district and looking at the trend data, and that's kind of what I like to do in the data piece, and look at the shifting needs of our kids. And looking, it says we didn't make growth, or we didn't make that much growth, or whatever. But thinking about the differences of the kids that are coming in now than the kids that came in 5 years from now. The needs are different, the poverty levels are different, the language, just all of those certain things. And then the things that we have in this report are stating those, this is what we're doing with this group of people, this subgroup of people to bolster them up, to get them achieving better, and thinking about, the data and the demographics and going, wow, we have 67% of our kiddos proficient in this is really amazing, thinking about the adversity that a lot of our kids are going through. So just as I reflected, that kind of hit me, and I was like, wow, you know what, we are doing a really good job, and just keep setting those goals and thinking about how our work as administrators and collaborators and working with our teachers and the needs of our kids and how they're growing. We have to really think about how we're going to provide that professional development to our teachers to teach those kids that are, maybe they're a little bit more difficult or have more needs or come with more stuff from their families. So really understanding and presenting that in a way to our teachers and our staff and our community that, our kids are different than they were five years ago. And to still be this good, I mean, we're doing really well. But that's, so that's going to make us an understanding, and that's going to make us really, by understanding that, it's going to make us succeed. It's going to make us excel with those things. So that was just an aha moment for me looking at this.
And with those statistics, it was one of the things that I noticed right away. I think we have had some maybe more idealistic goals a 5% increase in 1 year is pretty lofty.
It's a lot.
Especially if you do have change in demographics. The fact remains that in almost every one of those data points, we did improve. We just didn't make 5% gains. It's kind of like when the admin team did a survey and we did a self-assessment as a team on how well we function on things. And Dr. Hill, when we got done with that self-assessment, we gave ourselves such low marks that he said, sometimes you're your worst critic. And I think as we looked and we sit down and we set goals, let's make sure that they're realistic goals that we set, because there was growth. There was growth there was decreases in the gaps. So those things are positive. And if we look at, where it's a simple, and it would be nice if it was a partial, I look at that one about the gaps. Some of those did meet, but either you meet the goal or you don't. It doesn't say partially.
Yep, that was hard.
So, and that is difficult. So, there's good starting points. I think I've told the board this before. One of the issues that we talked about administratively is the template that we've got to work with right now is the fiscal 17, this past year's template. They have not created the new template to work with on this current year. So you normally would like to be able to say, here's the things we have to do. And by the way, the state has put the template out. Because as an example, one of the requirements that we have to deal with for goals for this year that will be reported next November is gifted and talented. But it's no place on the template right now because they don't have the new template out. But we know we have to have a goal associated with gifted and talented. So if we just looked at the template, we wouldn't have it. So we have to do some planning for that. And we'll continue to have those discussions as we go into January with the new group, because what will happen moving forward when we get into these committee structures, this is the point where we have parents and community members involved in the world's best workforce. That's the part that's missing right now. And starting in January, we can have that. So we're already making those plans.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice job.
All right, moving on to 6.2, board committee reports. Lindsay, you had mentioned you went to a wellness?
Yep, I went to wellness today. Kimberly Wally spoke at the last board meeting about their goals and their action plan. Really nothing changed. The only thing coming up for wellness is in January they're going to have their week of wellness planning. They've got some great things happening for their staff again. They'll do some treats and some highlight different books and gratitude day. And then March Madness will be happening again. So I will hand those out when I get those handed out if anyone wants to exercise. And February 7th is Minnesota Winter Walk to School Day. So question whether our teachers will take the students outside or walk the halls or in the gym. Might be a little chilly in February, but the rate it's going, who knows? We might not have snow. And Chelsea was there, and she's still waiting for that Midwest Dairy Council. She had gotten that grant for that second breakfast option, and she's hoping the cart's here by January, because that's when she was planning on starting it. So, and she also just applied for a farm to school grant for $30,000. Half of it's from Blue Cross Blue Shield. She mentioned a combi vent and bins for produce as part of her grant proposal, and she should know by the end of December whether she gets that or not, December or January. So that would be awesome if she did. And that's about it.
Okay.
That second breakfast is at the high school, right?
Yes, and I asked where they would possibly be putting that, and she said they had talked about doing the commons area out by the high school, or by the gymnasium, because that'd be a kind of a easier access for them to go that direction than back to the cafeteria, but that's yet to be determined. So just kind of the discussion happening, but and they were going to use this cart. She plans on offering it twice before school, kind of hit those people that maybe take the bus, and maybe the second, after the first period, then it would be those students that drive themselves that could go down. and grab a breakfast. So yeah, she's excited about it, and I think she's got some great ideas. So hopefully it'll be well received by the high school students.
Certainly goes out for a lot of grants.
She does. Oh my goodness, she's a go-getter, that one. We're very lucky.
All right. Committee reports, negotiations. Scott, you want to speak?
Yeah, I can
How that's
update.
going?
So negotiations, just to get everybody here caught up on the board, kind of where we are. We've had a couple changes, but nevertheless, if y'all remember when we approved the budget recently, we approved basically for staff, we just figured in a 3% increase. That was about $276,000 is what we budgeted. So we kind of did it a little bit different. Maybe it's in a nutshell, when we were sitting and visiting with Brian, I said, the first question you always ask is, I know we budgeted for 3%, but what can we afford? Is there, just so we can at least be transparent about it. And he said literally 300,000 a year. So 300 the first year, 300 the second year. Because when you look at the budget, your first year is 300,000, your second year would be 300,000, but that totals after 2 years at $900,000. So that would be stretching us, which it would put us in the red. But the question is, can we do it? And at the time, naturally, he said yes. So rather than kind of doing the traditional countering, that is common, we wanted to be a little more transparent, open the book, and simply say, this is what we can't afford, but we're willing to, extend to. And then however they choose to spend it, as a committee that's representing all the certified staff, we felt that they would be able to better decide how the money's spent as a whole. We found out after our last meeting that we were shy 41 students. That made a huge impact. And we had a pretty long discussion about it. And as a committee, we felt that it would be tough, but we should honor that 300 and 300, total of 900 over the 2 years. And how much, Brian, how much did we actually go backwards?
New money coming from the state and levy dropped from 642 to 279.
Yep. So it was a significant drop. So we had a verbal agreement on 2% first year, 2% the second year, and then 1 personal leave day we would be adding to all the certified staff. It went a little bit over that. I think what we initially thought was it would have been about 905,000 and change, and I think we're all comfortable with that as a board. Unfortunately,
As a committee.
yeah, there was, and it was contingent, of course, on Brian looking at it and kind of reviewing the numbers, and he caught an error. FICA was zeroed out, and that was just an accident. It wasn't, just a oversight. Well, that changed those numbers to the tune of about $40-some thousand. So the actual increase was, it made it unaffordable. So the correction that we had a discussion on was, okay, if we just dropped the 2 and 2 to 1.8%, it would be right around that 900,000. It really does put us in the red, but I mean, as a committee, we felt that our staff, it was tough. As of right now, I thought it was going good. I don't know at this point where we're at completely. So.
Well, what's the next step then? Do we have to start cutting things, I mean, if it doesn't go, what do we have to do to afford?
Well, I guess my suggestion would be, and I can't speak for Sandy or Lindsay, but I'm still where I stand because that's what I offered, and I offered it after we looked at the numbers and the 41 less students. So I'm still fine with that 300, but at some point I believe that we should, the numbers will be coming out soon. Brian's going to go over the audit, so you can kind of see where we are. But I would be for the 1.8 as we agreed for. Not forever, because like I said, we have to update our budget at some point. but that's kind of how it's been. It has been very, very great, you know, I think as a whole. It was just, we got hit pretty, initially it was a little bit of a hit, but then losing the 41 students, that became a really hard hit. But in terms of where to spend the money, I don't think that should be board shouldn't be making that decision. I think the staff should.
And we will have, you know, I think this does go hand in hand with when we get into the audit. We can come back to some of this stuff, and then you're gonna have to decide as a board, you know, you have some direction that you want to give to the committee as far as, you know, these numbers.
Oh, just so there's no confusion too, when I said a 1.8, that's on top of, you have lane changes each year, you get a.
Steps and lanes.
Steps and lane changes, but you also need to look at, that's on top of that percentage. Like I said, I would love to give more, as I said at the last meeting, but it's just, we can't afford what we're giving right now. Like, literally,
And some of the handouts you have there, it includes
what we're offering.
to be able to see what those steps represent. The one sheet that shows the 16, 17 DGF base year, again, this is all public information. You know, it's our matrix. So the top one shows a matrix, whether it goes from the left to the right, BA all the way to master's plus 30. We have up to 18 steps for the MA 30. We have less steps for the BA. It stops at step 14, or step 15. You'll notice after that, everything's identical on the BA, 55, 133. As you go to the right, you can get more years, increases each year. The bottom one there on that same sheet just shows, based on those increases of those steps, what do the steps represent, each one of those cells, from the previous cell directly above it. So you'll notice under the BA, step 1, that original 37,682, well, that 38,743, then with looking at the number at the top, is actually a 2.82% increase from the previous step. So you can see the steps themselves, what they represent. So when we talk about the 1.8, that's over and above these steps. And that's how, when you get those packages and you're looking at the averages overall of being 3 point some, that's how it can happen, because you've got people at different steps. Make sense? So we want you just to have that so that, again, you can get an idea of how it affects everybody, you know. That first sheet, and again, we'll hit this, I'll come back to it when we go into the audit, because I think some of those projections, it's important for people to understand how closely, when we talk about what we are actually budgeting, when we do a revised budget, you'll see how close we actually are. So when we say when we're going to update the revenue budget, you'll see that we're usually pretty close on that. There isn't anything hidden with it.
Well, and
So-
that was the reason why, you know, before the first meeting, like I said, we all knew what we budgeted for. I mean, it was in a meeting, we budgeted 3%.
Exactly.
But the reason I asked them, what can we afford, is, you know, if you're taking a little from Peter to pay Paul, you know, that was that assumption, you know. Some districts, maybe they have a slush fund, you know, but typically, no, they don't. So that was, what's the worst case scenario? What can we afford? And that's important to me. Because like I said, I think our staff do a great job.
Yeah, I agree.
So.
And we'll hit this, like I said, more when we hit the audit. Because some of this will go hand in hand with it. It's perfect timing with having the audit tonight.
So then we will, does anybody have any questions before we move on? Okay, so we would move on to 6.3, the superintendent report.
Timing me for my 10 minutes. Okay, just a few things. December, when we come back for the December meeting, at that time, I met with Ken Hovde today. We'll be ready for that transition. Ken is looking at being done 2 weeks from 2 weeks from last Friday. So in 2 weeks' time, he'll be done, so that when we come to the board at the December meeting, it'd be looking at taking the temporary, having the board approve instead of a temporary one or the interim, moving it to a permanent one for James. It's going really, Ken gave me some anecdotes as far as just on good examples. He feels very comfortable about this, and that makes me feel good, hearing from Ken directly that, you know, James is going to do well with this, and James wants to be here for 30 years. I'm like, he goes, well, both you and I will probably be gone by that time. I said, in more ways than one, we'll probably be gone in 30 years. So that's one thing that will be coming at the December meeting. Tracy, Joe, Tammy, Ken, the five of us sat down and we've been working on, and this will be coming back to the operations committee, because we'll definitely want an operations meeting at the December one. As far as we went back through the job description for the position that Ryan is in, because remember, when that position was created, it was basically working between multiple areas. We created it so that it would be helping out with the bench setup, but also working with the maintenance and supervision. So again, growing pains with that as we've had transition. So we have really a very good meeting with all of those three departments, whether it be looking at the activities department, looking at the community ed department, looking at the maintenance department. It's a little bit of give and take. It's kind of like when the principals sit down and looking at having personnel that are shared between sites. You always have give and take with those things. And the same thing is happening here. But it was a very good meeting, and there will be recommendations with an update to the job description for that position. That'll all be discussed with the operations meeting that night, so that when we look at putting James in charge at that time at December, we can also talk about how the transition's going for Ryan's position. Okay. Did a contract, we have that in place now for behind the wheel with Eileen. Again, it's a whopping $1 rental lease charge for just her having where in the office for her files, because of course she's an independent contractor. So we basically just needed a space for a file to keep all of those files there. So we have an agreement for that. So Eileen's company will be doing the behind the wheel moving forward. Middle school is working. I don't know if Heidi's still here or not, but the MSBA, they are working on, they have the team, I think, established for that. So those of you board members that will be going to the Twin Cities for the Leadership Conference, you will see some representation, student representation from DGF Middle School at that, which is great. I was meeting with Matt again today. A couple things high school wise, the frequently asked questions piece for the band trip, that is a work in progress. We need to have that on the website. And then the policy 620 will be ready for the board for a first reading. So the policy committee will have an updated copy of that with the recommendations from the high school. So they have a version that they'll be putting in purple. So policy committee, just know that that's coming, because we have to have that weighted grading piece for that.
Are we having another policy meeting before?
Depends upon how many more we'll try to cover. We'll have to figure out afterwards whether we've got time. We should have time in between now, because we don't meet until I think the 18th. So it's a matter of just getting our committee together, but we've got a couple of weeks to work with on it. So I think we should be able to. And the last thing I have is I don't know if you've received calls yet, but remember the tax statements came out. And so if you haven't received calls, we'll probably have questions. Notice that we moved the TNT meeting cannot be before the board meeting. It must be after 6 o'clock. So it'll be a committee report time that we'll do this, because by law it has to be 6 p.m. or later. So we can't have a 5 o'clock one anymore for that. So we'll have a public opportunity for people to talk and ask questions. So that will be an open forum type if they have questions. So we'll do that right away at 6 o'clock when we hit the reports. So again, remember, one of the blanket statements to be able to put out to people is if they look at their valuation, that's a critical piece because residential went up quite a bit in our school district. Our school taxes didn't make, you approved that, our school taxes didn't have that big increase. But like from what I've seen and talking to other people, people are seeing a 15% increase in their overall taxes. It's not because of our total levy going up by that kind of a percent. It's because people's assessed values of their residence went up quite a bit. And for that reason, they're paying more in taxes. I know mine went up 20-some%. So we're gonna get those questions from people. But that's an easy one. Have them look at their valuation from 16 to 17, because that's the big change. But we're gonna get shrapnel on it. There's no question about that.
Call the county.
Call the county, yes. They did the valuation after some other things got taken care of. So that was the whole thing. Under 10?
Under 10.
It's a record.
Questions for me?
It's a record.
I don't believe you.
In 6 minutes, I've been watching.
Really?
6 minutes, 27 seconds.
All right.
The audit, I'll be talking more.
Yes. All right, so we will move on to 7.1, the approval of the November 13th regular meeting. Motion to approve minutes. Motion by Amy, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Raleigh. Any questions? Hearing no questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Moving on to 8.1, under the business, under the claims and accounts.
Total bills to be approved at this board meeting, $219,579.69.
And in your packet is the treasurer's report and the Minnesota liquid asset account, activity account report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Was that Lindsay or Bobby?
Bobby.
Sorry, Bobby. There's the second. By Scott. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Moving on to 9.1. Here we go with the audit.
Okay.
Don't set a timer for this one.
No.
I thought
this
that was,
one-
I thought that was included in it, 10 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah.
this one, a little bit more time. So you've seen the condensed version before. What I was gonna focus on was the financial statements, the bigger package. And I've got a few different pages that I want to show you particular pieces out of this, and then whatever other questions you
So
have.
you're on the big one?
So the big one, the financial statements.
Which page?
So the first page, if you would turn to page 7, and I'll explain a couple things on that page, because this is where these GASB regulations, the GASB 74, the GASB 75, hit and took effect. And again, remember, the GASB regulations are accounting. It doesn't change how much money you actually have. It's a way of acknowledging future liabilities. So one thing you're going to notice on the middle of that page, on page 7, when you look at deferred outflows of resources, 2016, $3,262,167. 2017, $24,517,000. Okay, believe me, we did not increase $21 million in resources. Okay, this is a way accounting-wise, and I'll show this in some other places where this comes in. Same thing, long-term liabilities. Notice, long-term liabilities went from $20,716,000 to $49 million.
Okay, but that's the Gatsby.
And that's what all of this is about.
Okay.
This is all about future liability. So in the same way that you show it as an asset and you show it as a liability. So this is the future projections of costs of those retirement funds. Okay? Again, accounting only. And that's why our net position, no, we did not lose $5.6 million this year. But again, if people with the wrong piece of information look at that page and they go, what in the world happened, guys, as a board? You went from 696,000 total net position to 5.6 million in the hole. Again, this is the first year public entities have had to show those future costs. Okay, brand new, GASB 74 requirements, because they want to show that liability. Any questions on that one so far? This is all going to go hand in hand. You're going to hear me say the GASB accounting over and over again in this. Now, page 8, next one, middle of the page, regular instruction. This is another perfect example of that. Where do they put those liabilities? Remember, these are liabilities associated with costs of personnel, future retirement costs associated. So they put it under regular instruction. No, our costs did not go from 7.1 million in 2016 to 13.1 million this year. We did not have a $6 million increase. But they have to show it on the books for the TRA liability, future liability. So again, GASB 74. Again, they link it to regular instruction. You're going to see something back in 2010. I'm going to show you another report in a little bit that goes hand in hand with this. And sometimes people don't understand what took place. In 2010, the school district actually realized over $1 million increase in the revenue on the books. And people assumed that it was hidden money, that all of a sudden just magically materialized. It had nothing to do with that. It was an accounting thing because of bonds. I wasn't here, but I went back and looked at audits from 2010. 2010 is when the board moved to have, when you look at all of our bonds, when you look at our long-term debt as a school district, you're going to see a lot of 2010 bonds. 2010A, B, C, and D. That was the year that all those bonds were taken out. And what they did was they had to show those bonds onto the books. So all of a sudden it's like having a line of credit when you do a construction loan. All of a sudden you got more money in your checking account, but it's because you're going to have an asset. So they give you the loan and you put it in your checking account, but you don't go out to Vegas on it. You actually have to put it into your assets. So it was very similar in 2010. So that's the big one on that page. Page 9 is really,
Question on it.
yes.
Special education instruction, is that real then, or is there a little bit of Gatsby in that too?
There's a little bit, if it's anything with instruction, they'll put a little bit into it. We did see an increase, but again, when you see some major increases, anything that's with instruction, it's gonna be those TRA parts that they have to put back into them, wherever there's licensed staff. So this year with the TRA, it would be in any of those areas that would have licensed teachers. So good question. Page 9, again, that just shows the overall amount of money. And again, what I did, I went back to the 2016 audit to compare the two audits to see which things jumped out. Again, overall, all of our funds, we've got a decrease of 68,000. So in that second line at the top, where it says actual change in the fund balance was a decrease of 68,000, that's overall for all of the funds. When you're looking at the general fund, debt service, food service, community service, all of the funds together, the whole thing is 68,000 in the red. Now you're going to see how much the general fund was in the red, because that's where the majority of it is. But 68,000 total. Next page, page 10. This is where, again, it can be deceiving if people do not know what to look for. In the middle of the page, there's a paragraph that says, in fiscal year 2017, general fund expenditures were more than the budget expenditures by approximately 57,000 prior to any MDE required TRA and PERA special funding situations pension expense entries. After this entry, which totaled 509,000, that's an important number, as an increase to both general fund revenue and expenses. Notice it's on both parts. General fund expenditures were more than budget expenditures by $566,000. Again, I'm going to go back to that $509,000 number, because remember, they increased it in both expenditures and revenue. So they realized so much of it in that year. Okay, at the bottom of the page, you're seeing how much each of the funds actually went up and down. The non-major funds exceeded, that was a plus 18,600. That would be Fund 4, Community Ed, and Fund 2, Food Service. I'm sorry, Community Ed. It'll be on that one. Food Service Fund was decrease of 64,100. Community Service, 74,600. So I'm back. OPEB, Debt Service, 8,100. So your total of all of these is that 18,600 when you add up all of those. The general fund, you're going to see in a minute, we're going to hit that. The next page I'm going to have you go to is the big one, page 16. And again, we can come back to any of the other pages if you guys have noticed
Okay,
something.
Brian, Amy has a question.
Yes.
Is the non-major funds, that's community ed, and then
No.
the community service fund also is?
Community service and community ed is all in one fund together.
Okay, so that's like ACFD?
Yes,
Okay.
all of the early childhood stuff is all in Fund 4.
Okay, got it.
Page 16 is where we're hitting debt service and all the other government funds. This is the actual totals. Now, while you're looking at that page, I'm going to give you, because you know I love trend data, because I think it tells us a lot of information. So what you're seeing is I've gone back to all of the audits from fiscal 10 through fiscal 17 and taken the information from this page, the changes in the fund balances, and moved it right over to this trend page. So all of these totals are right out of audits. There is no surprises. This is audited information that's out there for all the public. It's on MDE's site once they get all the information. The things that I added in that you're seeing on my trend report is I added our amount of pupils, not pupil units. I could not do pupil units because remember, pupil units changed. The weighting changed during this time period. Okay, high school kids used to be 1.3s.
Right, and kindergartners were only.
And 1.62, and then you had 1.115 and all that. So you couldn't do it that way. So if I just kept for consistency apples to apples, the amount of kids that we had. So you've got that one trend report that I always give out that we update, showing all the way back 15 years, showing that cohort, how they moved through. That's where these numbers are. So I took them exactly from that October report that we put out. So notice I put in the amount of pupils. So this year was 1,628. Less pupils than last year, than fiscal 16. So when you look at the amount of levy per pupil, you simply divide the levy by the 1,628. When you look at the 10,442, you just simply take the total revenue, the 17 million, divided by the pupils, 1,628. And that's how much you get per student. It's a good thing to be able to look at from audited information, because when we start talking about, well, if we drop 30-some kids or 30-some pupils, well, you can see how much that is in revenue if it's over $10,000 per pupil. So that helps us when we're looking at those enrollment numbers, when you look at the audited information associated with it. So you can see the revenue. Now, one thing that is, this goes back to that page of that $500,000. Remember that they put on both revenue and expenditures? When you look at from fiscal 16 to fiscal 17, it makes it look like, and this is audits, it makes it look like we went up from 15,596,000 to 17 million. a $1.4 million increase. But remember, we didn't. Because accounting-wise, they took $500 and some thousand and showed that on paper on future costs. So we didn't actually get 17 million from the state. They realized 500 and some thousand of it as future costs from an accounting purpose. So I just want you to be aware of that when you look at these numbers with the trend. That's why when you see a 10% increase in revenue, we didn't get 10% increase, folks. You know we didn't. So same thing on the expenditures. It shows an 11.3% increase. Well, we didn't get that much. We didn't spend that much of an increase. You had 500 and some thousand dollars of actually on paper, okay, from the GASB requirements. But I want you to see fiscal year 10. I added that one into this trend piece. If you go back to fiscal 10, because that was one of the years that I've had some questions about from people, perception of as far as hidden money, to be honest. If you take a look at that one, look at what happened with the fund balance. At the beginning of that year, the fund balance was 1.1 million. At the end of the year, the fund balance was 2.3 million. And most people in the public would go, what in the world did you do that you gained a $1.2 million? There wasn't $1.2 million more. It was that the bonds came in and you capture the money in the bond in advance of future payments from our OPEB. So it's money that we got. It happens to be a particular bond that we then have in the bank that we've levied for future costs. And then we're paying out the payments out of that. So that year, it didn't gain 1.2 million, okay? But on the books, it looks, and the reason you can tell that that's the case, look at regular instruction on that year for expenditures. It shows 6.979 million. The very next year, it dropped down to 5.88. Well, do you ever see a drop like that on regular instruction in any of the years after? No. They captured that amount of money from the bonds and showed it on paper that particular year. So when you hear people talking about hidden money, this wasn't a hidden money thing. This was a bond that came in during that year to be realized for future expenses. And it's important for you as a board to be able, if you ask questions, because again, I wasn't here during that time, but I went back to the audit because I wanted to make darn sure that, again, if we're going to be transparent with the public, people need to understand that there wasn't hidden money there. This was a bond. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's on the trend. Now we'll get back into the page 17. Page 17 is an important one that I wanted you to be able to see exactly how this is about future expenses being realized. If you look at that, the paragraph that's associated with the $4.9 million, okay, says, in the statement of activities, the cost of pension benefits earned net of employee contributions is reported as pension expense. In the governmental funds, however, the contributions are reported as expense. You read that and you go, okay, what the heck does that mean? Well, to put it in perspective, the year before, in the fiscal 2016 audit, and any of you that don't have these audits, we've got all the audits, digital ones, and I think I gave you all access to that folder. But here's the deal. In the 2016, the exact same page, the exact same explanations, the number that was there in 2016 audit, instead of $4,905,000, $2,399. Instead of 4.9 million. It's because you're having to show those expenses now. Accounting only. And that's why last year at the bottom, the change in net position was a positive 556,000 instead of now being a negative 4.5 million. Nothing dropped by 5 million, folks. Okay? Next page. This one is the heart of the whole report. And I think it's important when we talk about the negotiations piece and everything projecting for the board. So if you look at the third column, the actual budget and the actual amount, this is for the audit. This is where that 135,000 for the general fund. This is all general fund, this page. This is the biggie. And if you look at the second column, the final budget, this was the one that was done in February. And that first sheet that when we were talking about the negotiations, and when you look at that first page of that from negotiations, that sheet, where we had the pupil unit projections, and the very first one said for fiscal 17, the year we're auditing, MDE revenue projection model, 2/2017. Now, I used this as the basis of giving you the revenue projections.
Could I add one of these out?
There should be, here,
Did you all see this?
this is all,
I got a couple.
Jenna, there's a bunch of extra ones here. Because this goes hand in hand. And again, the committees have all seen this before, but again, this is important because back when when the board approved an updated budget for this past year, which is this audit year that we're looking at right now, that was projecting revenue with 1751 pupil units. Okay? That was the basis of this final budget. Now, remember the $509,000 that was not real money? So what you got to do when we're really looking at how close the final budget was to the audited actual amount of money is you're decreasing by 509,000 the actual amounts to look at real numbers, the real dollars that were spent. And here's what happens. That actual drops from 17,499,000 to 16,626,000. What that means is the revenues will drop to 16,491,000 because it's dropping 509,000. What that means is in comparing the actual to the final budget, our budget was off 0.5%. Half of 1%.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, did you get an award or anything? They're getting it that
It's
good?
really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's scary. It's
Yeah.
lucky good.
Yeah.
I wish we could do that. Well, no, I don't want to get that close every year.
No.
The expenditures, you do the same thing. You drop the 509,000 off. That brings the expenditures actual to 16,626,716, which means we were off budget by 56,579 or 0.3 of 1%. So less than 1%, less than half of a percent. I tell you that because when you look at this sheet, when we're projecting the new numbers, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be pretty close to what the actual revenue is, because we were within 1% of actual this past year, based on our projections. That's good and bad. When we talk about 600 and some thousand dollars that we planned for new money, and now we're 270 some thousand of new money. Based on our past experience, we're pretty accurate with our projections. Okay? Remember last year when we had them out for the audit, I think we were within 3%. It was 2 point some, and they said that's really, really good. I've never been within 1% on both before.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't give you any leeway.
No, there isn't room. So, but I want you to see that to me is an important one when you're looking at future projections on what you can spend on things, knowing that there isn't a lot of room anymore, folks. The next page, believe it or not, we're all going all the way to page 30 because a lot of the ones in between are definitions of terms. On page 30, this is another piece that's important. I thought it'd be important for you to notice note 3. Because note 3 is showing at the bottom of that page how much money we have as receivables. Now we know when times aren't good, the government borrows from us basically on the payments that we're going to be getting, and Sandy's experienced it dropping all the way to 70% of our actual with 30% receivable. Because at least they're not cutting us off from the amount of money we're going to get, they just delay the payment for a year. And they keep doing that. Why this is an important page for you to know is notice the amount of receivables right now, $397,000 of federal. We know that it's on paper. We're getting the money this year. We always get the following year. So this past year, we had this amount of money that we're receiving in this current year of money that we should have had last year. 397 of federal, 1.65 million of state, for a total of 2 million. Last year, same audit, same page. Last year, the federal amount that we had coming in receivables was 171,000. State aid, 1.28 million. A total of 1.5 million. So we have over $500,000 more of receivable. So when you're looking at those monthly statements that you get from Cindy on how much money we actually have, just remember the trend right now is that they're holding more money back on us. That's why I want you to be aware of this page. Even though we hear that we're at the 90%, the 90-10, that's where you want to be at, because that's as far as they go. They always hold 10% back. But what's happening is when there's projections that are off, special ed and what else not, there may be more money held back on us in receivables. So I want you to be, any questions on page 30? I don't have too many more, folks. Page 32 is the next one. I like this because I think it's important for the public and for the board to know exactly how much we have left in debt. And I love looking at when I'm seeing decreases in long-term debt. So in the middle of the page, you can see our bonds. Notice all those series, 2010 series?
That was the year.
That was the year. That's why all of a sudden you had 1 million more in the bank. Because you got money in bonds to collect that money in advance to pay for future debt. So 9.3 million is how much we have in principal outstanding debt of our bonds. Last year was 10.26. So we are making headway on, for the first time, we're under 10 million in long-term debt. We were at 15 million when I came here. So we're making good progress. At the bottom of the page, our total of principal and interest last year, instead of it being 1.456 the year before, we were at almost 1.7 million. So we're paying the debt down. That's a good thing. Okay? The next one is page 48. Last one of the things that I think out of all of these pages are important. And this is the big one because this is about the TRA. This is about all of that future projected costs. Now, this again goes with the GASB regulations. The district's proportionate share of net pension liability, existing personnel for the TRA costs projected. $35,540,000. That's what's on there this year. Last year, that number was 8,700,000. So it's $27 million more of debt that's having to be shown on the books this year because of GASB regulations. Again, we didn't drop $27 million of expenses. It's all on books. But anybody from John Q. Public or what else not say, how in the world did you drop 27 million? We didn't. These are GASB regulations.
So what did they plan on doing with all the information that they received from the GASB?
A big part of the...
All of the districts, they're gonna look at it and they're gonna say, where are we gonna ever come up with this money you had?
This is one, and it's a good thing that, I honestly believe it's a good thing that they are showing this, because what it's gonna force when they get down to the state, every year we talk about the problems with TRA and these pension plans, that they're not solvent. This is showing exactly how much money, when TRA goes, if all of a sudden it goes bankrupt, this is how much liability there now is for just this district to meet the needs of TRA, of the retirement benefits.
But that would be if every teacher retired at the same time.
This is just the projections of how much of those
Yeah.
future ones over, again, it's spread over there, and it's all based on those previous pages. When you look through the previous ones, they show you, okay, based on how long you're gonna live, what year you were born, how many years you'll probably collect, what people are retiring at, so how many years of pension they're actually gonna claim. And an actuarial actually figures out each person on average gets about 22 years, or whatever that magic number is. And then based on that benefit that they get, it's $35 million now that it, and again, they're doing this to kind of force the state to say, look, you got a problem here unless you put more money into TRA. And think about the fact, now remember, the state didn't deal with this problem this past year. Every year you don't deal with it, it's like the national debt. What happens? It multiplies itself, it gets worse. So now they're talking about to correct it, instead of a 50/50 or a 1 and a 1, you may need to have a 1.5% increase on the employer part, and you may have to have an employee part that's also an increase. Again, your projections that we're dealing with here, when we're talking about the packages, are based on the existing TRA amounts. What happens if TRA increases by 1%? If the state doesn't pick up the 1%. Remember, MREA's platform, MSBA's platform was that whatever increases in TRA for the employer, the state should pick it up. Well, what if the state doesn't pick up that 1%? Just take 1% of your 8-point-some million. There you got another 80,000 that you didn't budget for. That's why I wanted you to see this. It's not all doom and gloom, but it's just, this is the reality. Okay? When you get into the supplemental stuff, that is all the activity accounts and such. The general fund's the biggie. Let's face it, the general fund's where you got most of your expenses. That's the cost of operating the school for the educational component.
So where we're at. Simple terms, this year we're red 135, is that correct?
Coming into this year, yes. Now, we still have, again, when you look at where are we sitting, how much money are we sitting with? Again, when you go to page 16 shows your fund balance. The trend report shows your fund balance. Remember, I gave you that trend report. The trend report shows that as of the end of this year, this past year, June 30th of 2017, we're sitting with 2.373 million in the general fund. We dropped 130-some thousand. We're sitting at 2.3 million.
Yep.
And again, you can see exactly how much of it is, and then, how much of that is unreserved compared to reserved accounts, that's all in the audit. You got health and safety, you've got, capital, you got all those things that you can't touch and use for salaries and what else not, because they're reserved for only certain expenses. But again, you gotta just, you gotta decide some things, knowing what you got coming, with your projections. Do I think you can make it work with the amount? I wouldn't have told you 300,000 per year before. But again, that 300,000 was based on the 600,000 increase. Can we make it work? We can make it work, but it's going to be one of those things we will be having to make recommendations on, because we're gonna have to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. That's a given, to make it work. Other questions for me? Thus ends my data report.
So are we talking cutting programming, or are we talking just putting off projects?
It could be a combination of those things, yeah. I mean, you think about how much money we spend on capital. We typically spend ballpark number $700,000-800,000 in capital. Doesn't mean that we may have to say some of those things have to wait.
Yep.
It's those things that, some of the support services, will there have to be discussions about, do you still have, I always struggle with when one expense area causes other expense areas. I like to keep it, okay, what's best for kids in general? Because I don't want to see programming for kids hurt. And that's what I'll keep bringing back. What is going to be the least effect on kids directly?
Yeah.
Because I'll guarantee when we sit down administratively, that's the discussion we have. I think Peg could reiterate that, because that is basically that's the basis of our discussions.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted if there's anything moving forward anytime soon. We should probably fix the budget a little bit.
And I can bring, it's up to you as a board, if you want me to bring in a new, full revenue projection for the December meeting. That's easy enough to do on the revenue side. Can't really change the expenditures.
Don't you think we should do that, if it's gonna change that much?
And you've got the totals. I mean, really, when other than federal money, because the revenue projection model is what's put out by the state. It's there for everybody to use. Jen and I've talked about it in her classes. It's about as transparent as can be. You put in your amount of pupil units you think you're going to have. That's what generates 90% of your money. It's then what are the other federal programs, and how can you maximize dollars to get the most bang for the buck? And I do believe we've been pretty good about maximizing as much of that money as possible. And Cindy's very good at that also. I mean, we know that, like with special ed as an example, you can run certain parts of special ed expenses through federal, and you can not do certain parts, benefits and what else not. So we maximize those things to get the bang for the buck. Think about what we've done with our levy and going up to the 742. We maximized to get as much state aid as possible. We didn't go to that next amount, hitting tier 3, which is going to give us less equity. So we took as much as we could, getting the most bang for the buck of state aid. But when the numbers of kids coming in is not increasing, and that's a reality that we have. Look at the fact of what we're doing. We are stabilizing our enrollment. And because of that, we're not going to be seeing, we've had a few years here, that I was here, the first 4 years for sure, where we always had 50, 60 more pupil units coming in. Well, then you got more money to work with. But all of a sudden now, look at our enrollment. Our enrollment in the fall, this fall, is less than 2 years ago. 2 years ago, fall of 15, was the high point. We're actually less kids right now than we had in fall of 15. So we can't assume more money coming in because of more pupils. There, I'm done. Questions for me?
I've heard that.
This is such an important piece. I knew it would take me some time to go through it.
And I know Brian would be around to, if anybody wants to.
Yes, and I'll meet with you the rest of the week. If you guys want to set up something to come in and go, that's what this week is about to me, because as we move this thing forward, this is a lot of the basis of some of the decisions that will have to take place moving forward with things. Programming in general, staffing, everything.
Okay, so I'm looking at 9.1, I'm needing a motion to approve the fiscal year 17 audit as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Scott, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Raleigh. So any questions can be, no, that's okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Moving on to 9.2, the certified seniority list. It's in your packet as well. The final approval will take place at the January 8th meeting. So this is the first reading.
So moved.
Motion by Lindsay, is there a second? Second. Second by Amy. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Moving on to 9.3, we are looking to approve the World's Best Workforce Summary Report, and that is what they presented this evening. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Bobby?
Yes.
And Amy, did you second that?
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Moving on to 10.1, the next school board meeting would be Monday, December 18th.
And I think we should put an operations
You said
meeting
the
at 5.
operation at 5.
Does that work? That'd be good timing for that one.
In Glendon.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so operations would be at 5 p.m., followed by the board at 6 at the high school on Monday, December 18th. 10.11, Brian already had referenced this, the Q&A for truth and taxation would be during the reports that evening. Has to be after 6 o'clock, so that's why that will be at that time. And then the payable levy certification would also be at that time. Anything else?
Do we want to put in a policy, or do we want to just see what the week brings and?
Oh, for the
Let's-
policy meeting?
Let's
Why don't we
see what
just,
this week.
yep.
Okay.
Okay,
When will that be in? 6:20 be in, do you think?
It's in your folder right now. There should be a Word doc or a doc that has, I had Brooke update the red line one to put it into a Google Doc. And then, so when you go to that and you can't open it, but you can download it as a Word document, because that will be editable. And what I asked Matt, I said, go in there and put your guys' recommended changes in purple. That way the committee will have a heads up on what things are coming from the high school.
okay. Meeting is adjourned, 7:35.
I'll show you that.